The signal came from a planet that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Or rather, the signal came from a training outpost on a ridge that wasn't supposed to host anything alive. Wiesel Karan stood in the ozone-stinking briefing chamber of Gale 9 and watched his translator node flicker red, then blue, then settle on a color that had no translation. The scorch pod on the display table pulsed with a slow bioluminescence, and somewhere near the center of the room, kicking his boots up on the safety rail, sat Private Dan Mercer. Human, grinning again. The title promise landed in the first 5 minutes. The instructor warned him about the poison roots. He asked for hot sauce. Mercer had already asked about hot sauce twice before the sterilization mist cleared. "You are expected to operate under primitive environmental conditions," Wiesel said, his facial ridges twitching as he spoke. The 12 trainees from 6 species shifted in their seats. The Glen ambassador's thoracic stress pulse sacs fluttered like paper in a vent. Limited equipment. Bioases containment fields only. Do not touch them. Do not breathe near them. Do not under any circumstances taste them. Mercer raised his hand. His other hand was already in his ration belt, fishing among unauthorized condiment pouches. "Is that the smoky kind or the spicy kind?" Mercer asked. "My uncle grows these in his backyard. Well, not these exactly. His are smaller, more wrinkled, but the color's right." Wiesel's translator node made a sound like a stone grinding against glass. He had spent 12 years preparing for every xenobiological threat the Interstellar Alliance had catalogued. He had written 17 resignation letters he never sent. He had studied humans extensively, their endurance, their pain tolerance, their inexplicable habit of treating danger as a suggestion. Still, nothing could have prepared him for what he now faced. The scorch pod on the table was classified. Trace contact may induce systemic organ failure within 20 minutes. The toxin bypassed dermal filtration and attacked neural tissue. Wiesel had neutralized 3 of them personally during his certification exam, wearing triple-layer bioases gloves, sweating through his thoracic abdomen sacs until the moisture pooled in his boots. Mercer leaned forward. "Ghost pepper family, right? Carolina Reaper vibes. We call 'em barn burners back home. The endorphin kick is half the fun." The room went quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when a predator enters a clearing, or when someone says something so wrong that the air itself refuses to carry the sound further. What happened next would reshape Wiesel's understanding of survival, cuisine, and the fundamental limits of biological sanity. Stay close. 3 hours earlier, Wiesel had been adjusting the lighting in Chamber 7B, trying to get the spectrum right for Q1 visual comfort without triggering photosensitive spiral reactions in the DUMAC trainees. He had checked his curriculum files 4 times, updated the hazard annotations for the death root specimen, and rehearsed his opening speech in 12 dialects. The mess zone tent outside smelled of recycled protein and mineral oil. A shuttle had landed on the ridge at dawn, offloading the new cohort, and Wiesel had watched from the observation station as a single human disembarked last, wearing fatigues stained with jam and chili oil, grinning at the dry ravine like it was a vacation brochure. Now that grin was aimed at Wiesel and at the scorch pod, and at the entire concept of interspecies survival protocol. "Private Mercer," Wiesel said, his voice steady only because he had practiced this tone in front of mirrors. "The scorch pod is not a seasoning. It is not a relative of any Terran plant. It is a neurotoxin delivery system that has killed 11 researchers in the last decade." 11, Mercer's eyebrows rose. "That's rough. We lost a guy to a ghost pepper once. Well, not lost. He just wished he was lost. Spent 3 hours in a bathtub full of milk. My uncle said he was being dramatic." The Glen ambassador's thoracic sacs pulsed faster. The Creek's medic, Drivelin, dropped her scanner and scrambled to pick it up, her stimulant gas physiology releasing a thin puff of lavender vapor that meant she was nervous. Relan, the Jankai trainee with dual eyelid sets and teal plating, leaned forward with the direct questioning instinct of his species. "Why are you all like this?" Relan asked. Not to Mercer, to the room, to the universe. Mercer pulled a foil pouch from his belt, Trail mix. Don't worry, no capsaicin this time. Mostly legumes, salt, dehydrated fruit, oh, and a few jalapeno-coated peanuts. He tossed it onto Wiesel's desk. The foil caught the green terminal glow and winked like a small star. Want some? Good for stress. My mom sends them. Wiesel did not want some. Wiesel wanted to write his 18th resignation letter, but he was a professional, and the sterilization mist was still settling, and the scorch pod was still pulsing, and Mercer was still grinning. Let's begin with the curriculum, Wiesel said. Standard survival orientation. Class 4, primitive conditions. You will learn to identify, avoid, and neutralize threats, not to appreciate them, not to pair them with protein, not to roast them with lamb, Mercer supplied, because that's what I do with the death root. Honey glaze, rosemary, maybe some garlic. Wiesel's facial ridges twitched so hard his mandible structure clicked. The death root was the second specimen on today's roster. It looked like a desiccated tuber, grey and twisted, and the file said its extract could stop a heart in 8 seconds. Mercer was looking at it like it was a side dish. Death root, Wiesel said carefully, is not horseradish. Sure looks like it, Mercer said. Smells like it too, sharp, sinus clearing. You ever had a good roast? The kind where the meat falls apart and the horseradish cuts right through the fat. The Glen Ambassador made a sound like a wet balloon deflating. Then the Glen Ambassador fainted. Drivelin was already moving, her calibrated stimulant gas physiology releasing a measured dose of revival vapor. The ambassador's thoracic stress pulse sacs stabilized, but their chitter vocalization continued at a frequency that made Wiesel's translator node ache. See, this is the thing, Mercer said, as if a diplomatic representative had not just collapsed from cognitive dissonance. Humans didn't start with safe food. We started with whatever grew in the dirt and tried to kill us. Then we figured out how to make it not kill us. Usually. Sometimes it still killed us, but we wrote that down for the next guy. That's how you get garlic festivals. Garlic festivals, Wiesel repeated. His voice sounded distant, even to himself. Big ones, Mercer confirmed. Raw clove eating contests. The winner last year ate 47 bulbs. His breath was a weapon for 3 days. My uncle tried it once, made it to 12, said it was worth it. Roland's dual eyelids blinked in sequence, processing. 47, the Jankai said. That is a number. It is a large number, for a plant that causes mucus layer shedding in Dumac physiology. Everything causes mucus layer shedding in Dumac physiology, muttered a Dumac trainee, adjusting their scarf. Their photosensitive spiracles flared behind the fabric. Shreya bulbs, Mercer continued, pointing at the third specimen before Wiesel could introduce it. These are garlic, or close enough. Saute in butter, put it on bread, my grandma's recipe. She'd cry if she saw how small these are. We're still in the baby zone. Wiesel sat down, not dramatically. His legs simply stopped supporting his thoracic abdomen sacs, and the bench was there, and gravity did the rest. The briefing chamber of Gale 9 stank of ozone, sterilization mist, and interspecies dread, and Private Dan Mercer was cataloguing lethal xenobiological specimens like a shopping list. This is worse than adaptation, Wiesel said to no one in particular. This is weaponized nonsense. The scanner Drivelin had dropped chirped from the floor. She picked it up, pointed it at Mercer, and the screen lit with readings that made her bioluminescent skin flicker pale green. Status, elevated heart rate, minor perspiration, enhanced endorphin levels, mood, euphoric. She tilted the device, as if it might change its mind if viewed from a different angle. Then it blinked twice and powered down. Mercer was chewing. He had produced something from another pouch, a dried strip of meat, dark and fibrous, stained with red oil. Buffalo jerky, he had called it earlier. He chewed while talking, which Wiesel's studies had identified as an oral fixation, but which now seemed more like a survival trait, a way of keeping the mouth too busy to accept further horrors. Pain is flavor, Mercer said, around the jerky. Got any yogurt? Wiesel did not have yogurt. Wiesel had a curriculum file that was now obsolete, a translator node that needed recalibration, and a growing certainty that the Interstellar Alliance had made a terrible mistake in admitting humans, not because they were violent, not because they were cruel, because they were hungry, and nothing was allowed to be dangerous if it could be delicious. The fourth specimen was the paralysis leaf. It looked innocent, broad, green, slightly waxy, and the file said it caused motor function loss in every species except one that used it for religious hallucination. Mercer picked it up, turned it over, sniffed it. Cilantro, he said. Pairs great with lime and grilled chicken. Some people think it tastes like soap. It's a DNA thing. You got the soap gene or you don't. My uncle doesn't. He puts it on everything. I do, but I power through it. The flavor's worth the weird. Roland's teal plating darkened with concentration. Taste can differ by DNA, within the same species. Within the same family, Mercer said. Thanksgiving arguments, tradition. The Dumac trainees' scarf slipped. Their mucus layer shedding had begun in earnest, a defensive response to the sheer volume of chemical stimuli being discussed. The Drun trainee, Tarug, tall and slim, with bioluminescent skin that flickered between blue and amber, slammed their cranial dome into the wall in what Wiesel recognized as an emotional reset behavior. The wall dented slightly. Tarug looked better. And this one? Wiesel asked, pointing to the final specimen. The cradle shroom, blue-gray, spongy, smelling of ammonia and decay. The file said it caused cellular breakdown in 3 species and mild nausea in 2 others. No known culinary applications. No known safe handling procedures beyond incineration. Mercer nibbled it. He did not hesitate. He did not consult the file. He pinched off a piece, put it in his mouth, chewed thoughtfully, and swallowed. Blue cheese, he said. Moldy texture. Like a gym sock had a baby with a limestone cave. Condensed regret, but in a good way. The French love this stuff. They put it on steak. The scanner in Drivelin's hand made a sound like a small animal dying. She did not look at it. She was looking at Mercer, who was still chewing, still grinning, still somehow alive. You're not dead, Wiesel said. It came out as an accusation. Not yet, Mercer agreed. Got any hot sauce? The real kind, not that mild stuff. Wiesel stood up. His legs worked this time, though his thoracic abdomen sacs felt heavy with a stress-induced nausea he had not experienced since his own training. He walked to the door of the briefing chamber, stepped into the dry ravine air, and kept walking until he reached his debriefing office. The green terminal glow welcomed him. He sat at his desk. He opened a file labeled Resignation Draft 18 and stared at the blank page. A shadow fell across the glow. Mercer leaned in the doorway, boots on the safety rail again, tossing a new foil pouch from hand to hand. Trail mix, Mercer said. Don't worry, no capsaicin this time. Mostly legumes, salt, dehydrated fruit. Oh, and a few jalapeno-coated peanuts. Thought you might need it. You look like a guy who's writing a resignation letter. Wiesel's facial ridges twitched. I am writing a resignation letter. 18th one. How did you? You've got the look. My uncle wrote resignation letters every week, never sent one. Said the writing was the therapy, the sending was the mistake. Mercer tossed the pouch onto Wiesel's desk. It landed next to the green terminal, winking in the glow. Try the peanuts. They're not that hot. Baby zone, remember. Wiesel looked at the pouch. He looked at the resignation letter. He looked at Mercer, who was grinning at him with the same expression he had aimed at the scorch pod, the death root, the shria bulbs, the paralysis leaf, and the cradle shroom. Not malice, not madness, appreciation. Why do you do this? Wiesel asked. The question had been building since the shuttle landed, since the first hot sauce request, since the Glen ambassador hit the floor. Mercer shrugged. All those plants back there. We learned how to eat them because we had to. That's what humans do. We don't always win, but we try things, a lot of dumb things, and somehow some of them turn out great. He turned to leave, then paused. The scorch pod, though, that one's special. You got any more? I want to settle this scientifically. Bite one raw, see if the scanner reads euphoric again. Wiesel's translator node made the grinding sound again. But this time, Wiesel did not flinch. He looked at the foil pouch on his desk, at the small handwritten label that said Trail Mix, Mild, and at the resignation letter that was still blank. "Get out," Wiesel said, but his voice did not sound like an order. It sounded like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, watching someone jump, wondering if the water below was as deep as they claimed. Mercer grinned wider. "Your loss," he said, and vanished into the ozone-stinking corridor. Wiesel sat in the green glow, alone with his blank resignation letter and a pouch of trail mix that might or might not contain jalapeno-coated peanuts. Outside, the dry ravine stretched toward the shuttle landing ridge, and somewhere in the dark, a human was planning to eat a raw scorch pod for science. He did not write the resignation letter. He closed the file. He opened the curriculum instead and began to type a new annotation next to the scorch pod entry, his fingers moving slowly, his facial ridges twitching with every word. "Potentially edible to humans," he wrote, "for unknown and deeply concerning reasons." Then he stopped. He looked at the trail mix pouch. He did not open it, but he did not throw it away either. Next morning, Wiesel found Mercer in the mess zone tent, surrounded by a crowd that should not have been gathering. The human sat on a ration crate, boots on the safety rail of a folding table, holding a scorch pod in one hand and a scanner in the other. Drivelin stood nearby, her bioluminescent skin flickering a nervous amber, clutching a sedative injector like a prayer object. Roland crouched close, dual eyelids blinking in alternating rhythm, recording everything on a personal data slate. The Glen ambassador sat cross-legged on the floor, thoracic sacs pulsing with a fascinated steadiness that Wiesel had never seen in a Glen before. The fainting spells had apparently burned through their capacity for shock. "For science," Mercer said, and bit the scorch pod raw. The silence was immediate. Then the scanner in his other hand chirped, whirred, and emitted a sound like a small animal being gently surprised. "Status," Drivelin read, her voice trembling. "Internal temperature up, minor perspiration, endorphin spike, mood elevated, internal alert, pleasure response linked to nociceptor stimulation." She looked up, her 3 optical stalks swiveling in unison toward Wiesel. "It says he's enjoying it. The pain is the point." Mercer chewed slowly, eyes watering, face flushing red under the capsaicin load. He did not show distress. He showed focus, the way a climber shows focus on a difficult ascent or a pilot during atmospheric re-entry. When he swallowed, he exhaled a breath that smelled of smoke and chemical heat. "Heat index a 10, he wheezed. "Pain a 12. Flavor surprisingly complex. Needs salt. Final rating, 3.5 stars. The Glen ambassador rolled onto their side, thoracic sacs deflating with a sound like a sigh. "He gave it stars," they muttered. "A numerical rating for a neurotoxin." "Your loss," Mercer said to the room, holding out the bitten scorch pod. "Anyone else want to settle this scientifically?" No one did. The Dumac trainee backed into a corner, mucus layer shedding visible even through the scarf. Tarug, the drun, slammed their cranial dome into a tent pole, which bent but did not break. Only Roland leaned closer, teal plating dark with intellectual hunger. "Why does your body make pleasure from pain?" the Jankai asked. "That is not survival logic. That is broken logic." "Oh, it's survival," Mercer said, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "You ever try to live through a winter with no food? You eat what you can find. Roots that burn, berries that sting. If your brain didn't give you a little reward for powering through, you'd starve before spring. We just turned up the volume over time." Wiesel stood in the tent flap, watching the human who had turned his survival class into a tasting menu. The trail mix pouch was still in his desk drawer, unopened. The resignation letter was still blank. And now, somewhere in the dry ravine beyond the mess tent, a shuttle was landing with a banner that Wiesel had not requested. The banner was pale violet, with cobalt aprons over armored biosuits. The Galactic Culinary Council had arrived. Their liaison was a Makari, short stature, three independently swiveling optical stalks that moved like nervous birds, wearing a bureaucratic inspection uniform that had been pressed with geometric precision. The liaison's name was something with too many consonants for Wiesel's translator node, so the Macquarie simply said, "Call me Inspector. I am here to audit the ingestive anomaly." Ingestive anomaly, Wiesel repeated. He was standing in his own briefing chamber again, but the green terminal glow felt different now, less like a sanctuary and more like an interrogation light. Private Mercer is not an anomaly. He is a human. Humans are simply differently calibrated. The inspector's three stalks fixed on Wiesel with the intensity of a targeting array. Terran ingestive behavior cannot be categorized under known food safety protocols. The scorch pod alone has a fatality index of 100% across all tested species. The death root, the shria bulb, the paralysis leaf, the cradle shroom, all confirmed lethal. Yet this human consumes them, rates them, and requests additional seasoning. The inspector produced a data slate with a flourish that suggested weeks of preparation. I am authorized to administer a synthesized fusion capsule. Scorch pod oil, death root extract, fermented shria bulb base. A biochemical weapon by any standard measure. If he survives, we reclassify. If he does not, we close the file. And if he asks for hot sauce, Wiesel asked. The inspector's stalks paused. That is not a scenario in my documentation. They found Mercer behind the mess tent, building something. He had commandeered a folding table, 3 ration crates, and a portable heating element, and was arranging small containers in a line that dripped with red, brown, and yellow oils. A group had gathered, not just trainees, but maintenance workers, a shuttle pilot, and 2 security officers who should have been patrolling the ridge. The human was holding court, and his congregation was growing. Fermentation, Mercer was saying, stirring a jar of something that smelled like vinegar and fire. You take a pepper, you salt it, you let it sit in its own juices until it gets angry. Then you blend it with vinegar and more peppers. Hot sauce. The Aztecs invented it. My uncle has a recipe with ghost peppers and mango that could strip paint. Could it strip viruses' containment? Tarog asked, their bioluminescent skin glowing a curious blue. Only one way to find out, Mercer said. He looked up and saw Wiesel and the inspector approaching. His grin widened. Instructor Karan, you brought a friend. Please tell me they brought yogurt. The inspector stepped forward, producing a small capsule that gleamed with an oily iridescence. Private Mercer, by authority of the Galactic Culinary Council, you are declared an ingestive anomaly. This fusion capsule represents the combined toxicological profile of 3 confirmed lethal species. Consumption is voluntary, but monitored. Refusal will result in formal quarantine and dietary restriction under Terran Digestive Clause 74B. Mercer took the capsule, turned it over, shrugged. Adaptive culinary endurance, he read from the label. Sounds like a workout program. He popped it into his mouth. 5 seconds of nothing. The inspector's 3 stalks swiveled in synchronized anticipation. Drivelin held her scanner, ready to record the moment of systemic collapse. The Glen ambassador's thoracic sacs pulsed so fast they blurred. Then Mercer folded himself onto the ground, not collapsed, absorbing, eyes tearing, face flushing deeper red. Hands flat on the dry earth, fingers spread, as if grounding himself against a wave that only he could feel. The scanner chirped. Heart rate elevated, Drivelin read. Skin flushing, endorphins rising. Mood, euphoric. Alert. Subject is experiencing intense nociceptor stimulation and interpreting it as positive. The inspector leaned closer, one stalk nearly touching Mercer's forehead. Do you require a trauma blanket? Do you have milk? Mercer wheezed. No. Then I guess we're leaning in. Mercer looked up at Wiesel, tears streaming down his face, grinning through the pain. Drivelin, I can administer a gut stabilizer. No, Mercer said. Let it pass through the cycle. I've started the journey. The journey. Wiesel's translator node ground against the word, trying to find a Q-an equivalent for a human who treated neurotoxin exposure as a spiritual experience. There was no equivalent. There was only Mercer, on the ground, suffering and smiling, while a crowd of 6 species watched in the silence of those who have witnessed something they cannot categorize. The inspector's stalks drooped, a Mac-carry gesture of profound bureaucratic defeat. Why do you persist in liking this? I don't like it, Mercer said, his voice rough but clear. I respect it. The heat, the pain, the flavor, it's a package deal. You don't get one without the others. That's the contract. He stood up slowly, dusting off his fatigues, which were now stained with chili oil and jam and something else, something green that might have been the fusion capsule's residue. He looked at the inspector, at Wiesel, at the crowd of trainees and workers and pilgrims who had come to watch a human eat poison. 3.5 stars, Mercer said. Heat index a 10, pain a 12. Flavor, surprisingly complex, needs salt, always needs salt. The Glen ambassador, half-dazed from their third near-fainting spell of the day, rolled over and muttered into the dry earth. He gave it stars. Again. He gave it stars again. That evening, the hot sauce workshop began. It was not authorized. It was not on any curriculum. But Mercer had gathered a following, and Wiesel had stopped writing resignation letters, and the Galactic Culinary Council's inspector had sent a preliminary report that consisted mostly of question marks and emergency citations. The mess zone tent became a laboratory of controlled chaos. Mercer taught the Dumac how to roast Schreier bulbs until the mucus layer shedding stopped and the photosensitive spiracles opened in pleasure. He showed Tarug how to pair deathroot extract with protein to cut the bitterness. He gave Rolan a drop of his Aztec-inspired sauce on a protein cracker, and the Jankai's dual eyelids blinked so fast they became a blur of teal. Only Drivelin refused. The Creek's medic stood at the edge of the workshop, clutching her scanner, watching her own species' physiology fail to process what humans called flavor. When Mercer offered her a drop on a sterile swab, she accepted it with the gravity of a soldier accepting a suicide mission. She touched it to her tongue. Her bioluminescent skin went white, then grey, then returned to its baseline amber. She sat down heavily on a ration crate. I have lost tongue sensation, she announced. It may return. It may not. I am uncertain whether this is a medical emergency or a cultural experience. Both, Mercer said. Welcome to the club. Wiesel watched from the observation station, his green terminal glowing behind him. He had updated the training manual twice that day, adding annotations that his superiors would not believe. Discontinue use of the term toxic, he had typed. Replace with potentially edible to humans, hazardous to everyone else. The words felt strange on his mandible structure, like speaking a language he was only beginning to learn. The inspector found him there at midnight, 3 optical stalks drooping with exhaustion. The council requires a formal classification, the Mac-carry said. We cannot file ingestive anomaly indefinitely. He must be named, contained, or certified. Certified, Wiesel said. The word came out before he could stop it. Certification of exception. Terran Digestive Clause 74B Adaptive Culinary Endurance. Status. Non-reproducible biological outlier. The inspector's stalks rose, surprised. You are defending him. I am classifying him, Wiesel said. There is a difference. But even as he spoke, he knew it was not entirely true. He was no longer certain whether Mercer was a threat to be managed or a bridge to be crossed. The trail mix pouch in his desk drawer seemed heavier now, as if the jalapeno-coated peanuts inside had begun to exert their own gravity. The next morning, Mercer found Wiesel in the debriefing office. The human carried 2 cups of something hot and brown, and he set one on Wiesel's desk without asking. It smelled of roasted earth and bitter alkaloids. Buffalo jerky, Mercer said, producing another strip from his belt. And coffee. Real coffee, not the recycled protein sludge they serve in the mess. My uncle sends care packages. I want you to try something. I do not eat human food, Wiesel said, but his facial ridges twitched, and he did not push the cup away. Not food, Mercer said. A question. Do you think we're reckless? Humans. You look at me eating poison and you think, this species is insane. They'll die out before they colonize their second star. Wiesel considered. The green terminal glow painted Mercer's face in shades of emerald and shadow, and the human's eyes were serious now, the grin replaced by something more like a searchlight. I think, Wiesel said slowly, that you are not reckless. I think you are desperate. Desperate to find the edge of what you can survive and then to dance on it. It is not courage. It is hunger. A hunger that does not stop at safety. Mercer nodded, as if this was the answer he had been waiting for. Yeah, that's fair. But here's the thing, Instructor. All those plants back there, the scorch pods, the death roots, the shrier bulbs, we didn't start with hot sauce. We started with starvation, with winters that killed half the village, with roots that made you vomit for 3 days but kept you alive. We learned how to eat them because we had to. And then, after we survived, we asked, can we make it taste good? He leaned forward, the coffee steaming between them. That's what humans do. We don't always win, but we try things, a lot of dumb things, and somehow some of them turn out great. Wiesel looked at the cup. He looked at the human. He looked at the trail mix pouch in his drawer and at the resignation letter that was still blank, and at the training manual that now contained sentences he would never have imagined writing a week ago. Your uncle, Wiesel said. He grows peppers. He sends care packages. He writes recipes. He is not a soldier. He is not a scientist. He is a cultivator. A gardener, Mercer said. Yeah, he says the best fertilizer is the gardener's shadow. Means you got to be there, got to show up, got to try. Wiesel's translator node made no sound this time. The grinding had stopped, as if the machine had finally accepted that some human concepts had no Qan equivalent, and that this was not a failure of translation, but a fact of existence. I will consider your coffee, Wiesel said, but not today. Mercer grinned, the searchlight switching back to its default setting. Fair enough, but you tasted the trail mix yet, the peanuts. I did not. Your loss, Mercer said, and walked out into the dry ravine morning, his boots finding the safety rail of the office steps before his feet touched the ground. Wiesel sat in the green glow, alone with a cup of coffee that smelled like distant planets and a drawer that contained a foil pouch and a blank resignation letter. Outside, the shuttle landing ridge was quiet, but the mess zone tent was already stirring with the sounds of Mercer's unauthorized congregation. The hot sauce workshop would continue. The Galactic Culinary Council would file their reports. And somewhere in the dry earth of Gale 9, a human was teaching 6 species that survival was not about avoiding danger, but about transforming it into something you could share. He reached for the drawer. He stopped. He reached again. The foil pouch was in his hand. The handwritten label said Trail Mix Mild. He turned it over. On the back, in Mercer's messy script, new words had been added. Mild salsa for beginners. Try it, or don't. Your loss. Wiesel set the pouch on his desk. He did not open it, but he did not throw it away either. The certification arrived on a data slate that weighed more than its physical mass suggested. Wiesel held it in his thoracic hands, reading the gold seal and the Terran digestive clause 74B, and felt the words settle into his abdomen sacs like a stone he had been carrying since the first hot sauce request. Cautionary curiosity, it read. Non-reproducible biological outlier. Do not attempt replication. Do not attempt understanding. Document and observe. He was still reading it when the shouting started. The mess zone tent was in chaos, but not the chaos of fear, the chaos of festival. Mercer stood at the center of his folding table laboratory, surrounded by species who had come to watch a human eat poison and stayed to learn how to make it taste like something worth sharing. The Dumac trainee was stirring a pot of shrier bulb paste, photosensitive spiracles open and relaxed, mucus layer shedding finally under control. Tarek had stopped slamming their cranial dome into walls and was instead grinding death root with a stone mortar, bioluminescent skin glowing a steady, content blue. Roland recorded everything, dual eyelids blinking in the alternating rhythm of deep intellectual satisfaction. Only the Glen ambassador sat apart, cross-legged in the dry earth, thoracic sacs pulsing with a rhythm that Wiesel could not read. The ambassador had not fainted in 3 days. They had not spoken in 2. "Your loss," Mercer called to the ambassador, holding out a cracker with a smear of amber sauce. "This batch is mild. Baby's own. You could handle it." The ambassador's chitter vocalization rose, then fell silent. They did not take the cracker. Wiesel approached, the certification heavy in his hands. "Private Mercer, the council has ruled." "Let me guess," Mercer said, not turning around. "I'm a menace to galactic health standards. Quarantine me in a yogurt factory. Feed me beige paste until I forget what fire tastes like." "An edible paradox," Wiesel read from the slate. "Not a threat, an anomaly, a cautionary curiosity." Mercer turned. His grin was smaller now, the searchlight dimmed to a candle, but it was still there. "An edible paradox. I like that. Sounds like a band name. My uncle had a garage band called the Edible Paradoxes. They played one show. The drummer got food poisoning from gas station sushi." "Your uncle appears frequently in your stories," Wiesel said. "Yeah, he raised me, taught me everything. Gardening, cooking, how to take a punch and get back up." Mercer wiped his hands on his fatigues, which were now stained with so many colors they had become a map of his journey. He'd love this place. All these new plants to try. New ways to burn your mouth and call it living. The Glen ambassador's thoracic sacs pulsed once, hard, like a heartbeat. Then they spoke. "Your uncle," the ambassador said. Their voice was chitter-soft, the vocalization of a species that had not evolved for speech but for resonance. "He is not here. He is not a soldier. He is not a scientist. He is a cultivator. And you speak of him as if he is the reason you are not afraid." The tent went quiet. The Dumac trainee stopped stirring. Tarug's bioluminescent skin flickered. Even Drivelin, who had regained partial tongue sensation and was now cautiously tasting a protein cracker with a microscopic drop of Mercer's sauce, looked up with all 3 optical stalks fixed on the Glen. Mercer was very still. "Yeah," he said. "He is. He showed me that the things that try to kill you can also be the things that feed you. You just have to show up. Got to try." The ambassador stood. Their thoracic stress pulse sacs expanded to full capacity, a gesture Wiesel had never seen in a glen. It was the posture of a species preparing to make a formal declaration or a formal surrender. "Then I will try," the ambassador said. "Not for science, not for diplomacy, for the cultivator, for the shadow." They took the cracker from Mercer's hand. They ate it. Their facial mandibles worked slowly, the chitter vocalization rising to a frequency that made Wiesel's translator node ache, then dropping to a register that sounded almost like music. The ambassador's thoracic sacs pulsed, 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 and then stabilized in a rhythm that Wiesel recognized, finally, as wonder. "Not death," the ambassador said. "Not even pain. It is conversation. The plant speaks and my body answers, and we are still both here." "That's it," Mercer said, his voice rough. "That's exactly it. The conversation, the contract." The certification in Wiesel's hands felt lighter now. He looked at the crowd in the mess tent, at the 6 species who had come to learn survival and found something else, at the human who had turned a training outpost into a garden of shared fire. He thought of his 12 years of xenobiology training, his 17 resignation letters, his careful protocols, and his neutral lighting, and his 12 dialect warnings. He thought of the blank page on his green terminal, and the foil pouch in his drawer, and the word he had typed in the training manual. Potentially edible to humans, hazardous to everyone else. He had been wrong. The hazard was not the plants. The hazard was the bridge. That night, Wiesel sat in his debriefing office and did not write a resignation letter. He wrote a new curriculum. He wrote about the Glen ambassador's cracker and Drivelin's tongue sensation and the hot sauce workshop that had become a diplomatic incident and then a diplomatic bridge. He wrote that survival was not avoidance but transformation, that danger was culturally negotiated, that the highest form of preparation was not fear but curiosity. The green terminal glow flickered. A shadow fell across it. "You're still up," Mercer said. He leaned in the doorway, boots on the safety rail, holding 2 cups. One was coffee. The other was something clear and steaming that smelled of minerals and heat. "Tea," Mercer said, setting it on Wiesel's desk. "My uncle's recipe. Ginger and scorch pod, steeped until the water learns to bite. I call it the diplomatic incident. Want to try?" Wiesel looked at the cup. He looked at Mercer. He looked at the foil pouch in his drawer, which had become a question he had not yet answered. "I am not ready," Wiesel said. "Fair enough," Mercer said. "But you kept the salsa, didn't you? The mild salsa for beginners. You didn't throw it away." "I did not throw it away," Wiesel admitted. "Then you're closer than you think," Mercer said. He picked up his own cup, sipped the diplomatic incident, and winced with the pleasure of a man who had found his way home. "The thing about heat, Instructor, it's not about being ready. It's about being willing. The ready comes after." He walked out, leaving the tea steaming on Wiesel's desk, leaving the question hanging in the green glow like a star that had not yet decided whether to rise or set. Wiesel sat with the tea, the certification, the curriculum, and the drawer. He reached for the drawer. He stopped. He reached again. The mild salsa for beginners was in his hand. The foil seal was intact. The handwritten label was Mercer's messy script, the letters leaning into each other like people huddled for warmth. He turned it over. On the back, in smaller letters, Mercer had added more. "Not a weapon, not a test, just a taste. Your move." Wiesel set the tin on his desk. He did not open it, but he did not throw it away either. 3 days later, the shuttle came to take Mercer back to the Terran Expeditionary Corps. The trainees lined up on the dry ravine ridge, 6 species in a row that would have been impossible a month ago. The Jumac wore a scarf dyed with Shria bulb paste. Tarug's bioluminescent skin glowed a steady, proud blue. Relan held a data slate filled with recipes and chemical analyses and questions that would take years to answer. Drivelin had regained full tongue sensation and had begun experimenting with microdose stimulant gas infusions in hot sauce, claiming it created a synesthetic flavor experience that transcends species boundaries. Only the Glen ambassador stood apart, as they always had, but now their thoracic sacs pulsed with the rhythm of wonder, and they held a small container of Mercer's farewell gift, a fermented scorch pod mash, labeled for the cultivator. "May your shadow grow long." Mercer shook hands, hugged shoulders, bumped cranial domes. He moved through the line like a gardener moving through rows, touching each plant with the confidence of someone who had learned that growth only came from showing up. When he reached Wiesel, he stopped. "You're not going to try it, are you?" Mercer asked. He was grinning, but the searchlight was back, the serious underneath. "The salsa, you're going to keep it in your drawer until it becomes a legend. The unopened tin of Gale 9. Tourists will come to see it." "I may try it," Wiesel said. His facial ridges twitched, but not with stress, with something else, something he did not yet have a name for. "Your loss," Mercer said, "but gently now, the way you say goodbye to a friend who is not yet ready to cross the river with you." He turned and walked toward the shuttle, his boots finding the safety rail of the landing ramp before his feet touched the metal. At the hatch, he paused. He looked back at the ridge, at the 6 species who had come to learn survival and found cuisine, at the instructor who had spent 12 years preparing for every threat and had finally found one he could not classify. "Pain is flavor," Mercer called out. "Got any yogurt?" The shuttle rose into the dry sky, leaving a contrail of ozone and spice, and something else, something that smelled like conversation and contract, and the shadow of a gardener who had never stopped showing up. Wiesel stood on the ridge until the sound faded. Then he walked back to his office, past the mess tent where the hot sauce workshop continued without its founder, past the observation station where trainees now watched the dry ravine not with fear but with appetite. He sat in the green glow. He opened the drawer. The mild salsa for beginners was still there. The foil seal was still intact. The question was still unanswered. He picked it up. He turned it over. He read the label one more time. "Not a weapon, not a test, just a taste. Your move." He broke the seal. The scent that rose was not the ozone of sterilization. It was not the mineral bite of iron-filtered light. It was heat and earth, and something that reminded him, strangely, of Mercer's tea, of the Glen ambassador's wonder, of the moment when a species decided that survival was not about avoiding the fire, but about learning to speak its language. He dabbed the tiniest trace on his tongue. A wave of sensation hit him. Heat, yes, but also something else. Depth. A chemical thrill, not pleasant but not bad. He sat quietly in the green glow of his office, the certification on his desk, the new curriculum on his screen, the empty shuttle contrail fading in the sky outside his window. Then he whispered, "I may never understand you people." From the nearby tent, where the hot sauce workshop was still in session, a voice drifted out. Not Mercer's. Drivelin's, or perhaps Tarug's, or perhaps the Glen ambassadors, learning to speak the language of fire in their own accent. "But you tasted it, didn't you?" Wiesel did not answer. He sat in the green glow, the heat still alive on his tongue, the question finally answered in a language that needed no translation. He looked at the tin in his hand. He looked at the certification on his desk. He looked at the new curriculum he had written, the one that began with the words, "Survival is not avoidance. Survival is the transformation of threat into flavor, of fear into curiosity, of the unknown into the shared." He did not throw the tin away. The morning after Mercer's shuttle left, Wiesel sat in his debriefing office and straightened his stylus 3 times before he noticed he was doing it. The green terminal glow was the same. The dry ravine outside was the same. The certification on his desk, gold seal, Terran digestive clause, 74B, cautionary curiosity, was the same. But the tin on his desk was open. The seal was broken. The heat was still alive on his tongue, a small fire that refused to go out. He picked up the stylus. He put it down. He reached for the curriculum file instead. The new title was already there, waiting. Survival Orientation, Class 4, Primitive Conditions, Limited Equipment, and the Human Factor. He had written it the night before, in the green glow, while the workshop voices drifted from the nearby tent. Now he scrolled through the annotations, the ones that would make his superiors question his sanity, the ones that would make the Interstellar Alliance rewrite its protocols. Rule 1, he typed. Do not touch them. Do not breathe near them. Do not under any circumstances taste them unless a human is present. Then ask the human first. His facial ridges twitched, not with stress, with something that felt almost like the chemical thrill still fading from his tongue. A chitter sound at the door. The Glen ambassador, thoracic sacs pulsing with a rhythm that Wiesel now recognized as contentment, not fear. The ambassador held a small container in their mandible hands. Fermented scorch pod mash, the same gift Mercer had given them. But the label was new, written in Glen script and human letters both. For the instructor, may your shadow grow long. I have been cultivating, the ambassador said, in the dry earth. The Shria bulbs grow here if you ask them nicely. The death root, too. They do not wish to kill us. They wish to speak. We are learning their language. Wiesel took the container. The weight of it was small, but the meaning was not. He set it next to the open tin of mild salsa for beginners, the 2 containers touching like diplomats from different worlds, finding common ground on a desk that had once held only resignation letters. The Alliance has approved the new curriculum, Wiesel said. Class 4 will include human trainees. They will teach as much as they learn. Good, the ambassador said. The shadow must be cast before the garden grows. They left. Wiesel sat with the 2 containers, the open tin and the fermented mash, the heat and the earth, the question and the answer that was not an answer but a beginning. 3 weeks later, a new shuttle landed on the ridge. Not Mercer's, a different hull, different markings, but the same last-to-disembark pattern. A human private, fatigue stained with something purple and orange, grinning at the dry ravine like it was a vacation brochure. Wiesel watched from the observation station, his translator node steady, his facial ridges still. The private found him in the briefing chamber. The ozone smell was gone, replaced by something else, the mineral bite of Shria bulbs roasting in the mess tent. the distant laughter of a hot sauce workshop that had become a permanent installation. Instructor Karan, the private asked. Private Yuki Tanaka, Terran Expeditionary Corps. I heard this outpost has a reputation. What reputation? Wiesel asked. For eating the things that try to kill you, Tanaka said, and asking for seconds. Wiesel looked at the human. The grin was different, smaller, sharper, a woman's grin where Mercer's had been a man's, but the searchlight underneath was the same. The hunger, the willingness. Your loss, Wiesel said, and almost smiled. Or perhaps your gain, we will see. He led her to the display table. The scorch pod was there, pulsing with bioluminescence. The death root, grey and twisted. The Shreya bulbs, the paralysis leaf, the cradle shroom. All of them labeled now with new annotations in 12 dialects, including one that had not existed a month ago, the human dialect of appetite. Do not touch them, Wiesel said. Do not breathe near them. Do not under any circumstances taste them unless you are certain, unless you are willing, unless you have read the contract. The contract? Tanaka asked. Pain is flavor, Wiesel said. Got any yogurt? Tanaka laughed, a sound like breaking glass and building fires, and reached into her ration belt. She produced a foil pouch, tossed it onto Wiesel's desk, and winked. Trail mix, she said. Don't worry, no capsaicin this time. Mostly legumes, salt, dehydrated fruit. Oh, and a few jalapeno-coated peanuts. My uncle sends them. The tin on Wiesel's desk seemed to pulse in the green glow. The open tin, the broken seal, the heat that had become a warmth, a language, a bridge. He picked up the pouch. He turned it over. On the back, in messy script, the same words Mercer had written, now copied in a dozen hands across the outpost. Not a weapon, not a test, just a taste. Your move. Wiesel set the pouch next to the tin. He did not open it, but he did not throw it away either. The green terminal glow flickered. Outside, the dry ravine stretched toward the shuttle landing ridge, and the hot sauce workshop was in full voice. 6 species singing in 6 keys about fire and transformation, and the shadow of a gardener who had never stopped showing up. The new private was already kicking her boots up on the safety rail, already asking about the scorch pod's heat index, already treating survival like cuisine and danger like conversation. Wiesel sat at his desk. He opened the curriculum. He began to type. Survival is not avoidance. Survival is the willingness to be changed. He stopped. He deleted the line. He typed again. The scorch pod is not a neurotoxin. It is a language. The human is not an anomaly. The human is a translator. Your move. He saved the file. He closed the terminal. He sat in the dark, the green glow fading, the 2 containers on his desk catching the last light from the window. The open tin of mild salsa for beginners. The fermented scorch pod mash from the Glen Ambassador. The foil pouch from the new private, unopened, waiting. He reached for the pouch. He broke the seal. The scent that rose was heat and earth, and something that reminded him of Mercer's tea, of the Glen's wonder, of the moment when a species decided that survival was not about avoiding the fire, but about learning to speak its language. He did not taste it, not yet, but he held it in his thoracic hands, feeling the weight of it, the promise of it, the conversation waiting to begin. Outside, the first stars were coming out over the dry ravine. The workshop voices rose and fell, a chorus of 6 species learning to sing in the key of fire. The shuttle contrail had faded hours ago, but the shadow it cast was long, and it stretched across the ridge, and it touched everything. Wiesel sat quietly. The tin was open. The pouch was open. The heat was alive on his tongue, and the warmth was in his hands, and the question was no longer a question but a door. He did not close the door. He did not close the door. He did not close the door.